Hello and welcome to my presentation. I am going to be presenting a community-based participatory research case study on Healthy Native Communities Fellowship, which is a program that I will describe in a little more detail in the following slides. My name is Mackenzie Good and I am a student of the community-based participatory research class. So first, I just want to give you an outline of what we'll talk about today. These are the topics that we'll cover in order: background and discussion of community health concern, a description of the community academic partnership and the project goals, the community-based participatory research approach and methods used, a review of processes and outcomes, dissemination and next steps, and also a conclusion and assessment of strength and weaknesses, which is my own critical assessment of this community-based participatory research project. So first we'll start off with a background of the health concern. American Native health communities show the highest health disparities among all minorities nationally. So this led the University of New Mexico's Participatory Research Center, as well as the Healthy Native Communities Partnership, to launch a program, this program in 2004. And initially it was started for expanding community teams' abilities to mobilize Native communities to promote health and wellness. The program consists of 4 week-long retreats. This is still true to this day. The coaching assists fellows in implementing new skills. It also helps build their confidence and their knowledge base so that they can do better in their roles within their communities. Every year, 14 to 15 teams from across the nation participate, and this is usually a pretty large number of people, with each team having upwards of 20 to 40 or so individuals sometimes. And the program also includes an internet-based learning community where these community teams can share their stories. I'll talk a little bit about the challenges with that later, but it's also a place that they can learn new things and access resources after they have completed the fellowship training. So first, before I get into more like the structure of this program, I want to describe the community academic partnership. I have it illustrated here in sort of a nested beehive kind of illustration, where you can see that the University of New Mexico Center for Participatory Research is associated with the Healthy Native Communities Partnership, and the Healthy Native Communities Fellowship is within that partnership. So over to the left, you can see a picture of some of the previous year fellows. Those pictures are from 2013, I believe, when they were promoting a health campaign called Just Move It. The picture above the University of New Mexico is a picture that the center uses to illustrate their approach to research. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you will see some of the people who make up the Native Communities Partnership. And in this photo, they were attending a training together. Okay, so the project's goals, it has a few. On the right, you'll see an illustration of the fellowship goals, and those are like the goals of the program itself. But first, I want to talk about the overall goals. So the initiative hopes to create healthier American Native communities by collaboratively designing and implementing prevention programs. By interacting with community teams, the partnership can create connectedness in these communities, provide a space for healing, nurture talents, and develop strategies to tackle community problems. So the image you'll see in the center is a medicine wheel, and essentially the entire fellowship program and curriculum were based off of the medicine wheel. Now, according to articles that I've read about this initiative, the Healthy Native Communities Partnership recognizes that each American Native community is vastly different. There's huge diversity across all of the communities nationally, and in order to address all of these with one shared program, they use the medicine wheel because they claim it is representative of shared Native values and philosophy. So the skills learned each week, which happen quarterly, are aimed at achieving the goals highlighted in the model. So in week 1, they start out in the listening component of the medicine wheel, and the idea is to sort of do like an appreciative inquiry, if you will. They start by recognizing and identifying community member gifts and strengths and strengthening listening skills, and that helps with individuals increasing their self-confidence and intention, their participatory behaviors, and their emotions and their affective changes. So following week 1, they'll get into more of group dialogue, and these impacts are team changes, which might include like internal collaboration, external effectiveness, and then it leads into week 3, which is more of like the action component, and that is hoping to impact community changes like health policies and practices and strengthen community capacity. And finally, the project ends in week 4 with hoping to get at regional impacts, so national advocacy, regional networks, and things like social support. So rather than this being like a back-to-back 4-week-long program where it's really intensive for 4 whole weeks, there's breaks in between each week of learning. So the community teams will get a chance to come together for these face-to-face interactive sessions for 1 week, and they learn each component of the medicine wheel. And then in between, they go back to the community and they are asked to try out their new skills. And this is where the internet-based program comes into play, because that also helps them keep connected as they're testing out these new skills. So they can build on what each other is learning, they can communicate about like what's working in one place, what's not working, they can offer each other comments and suggestions, that sort of thing. This is a little bit more about the CBPR approach and methods. The picture you see on the left is less important than what I'll talk about on the right, but I do want to address the picture on the left, which is from the University of New Mexico's Center for Participatory Research. It's the framework that they use to carry out their projects from within. So it's what the academic partner is using to carry out their research projects. So they have like specific things they look at within the context. They have specific partnership processes. And then this model sort of addresses intervention and research, like, you know, community being involved in the research and appropriate research design. And then they talk about things that they would want outcomes to be, both short-term, medium-term, and like longer term. But on the right, this is sort of the framework that is used to evaluate the fellowship component of this partnership. And the reason why I want to focus more on it than the left picture is because it has to do with this very specific project. So it is what is used, this fellowship theory of change logic model that you see there on the right is what's used to conduct the participatory evaluation that guides the evaluation of the fellowship. So just as the medicine wheel sort of looks at these different levels of impacts, the theory of change model addresses that. And it starts with individual changes, which leads into team changes, and then community changes, and then eventually grander scale regional changes. But they want to look at how all these changes are linking to long-term health status changes and socioeconomic changes. They don't currently have a way to create that linkage, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But they are really interested in the linkage, and they're doing their best to try to figure out a way to assess the linkage. So this is a little bit more about the changes that the fellows experienced as a result of the program. And these are definitely expressed in more depth within like articles about the initiative, but there's a few that I think are really key, and I can talk about some of the other ones as well. But the outcomes that I thought were more like broad scale and really important were increased partnerships as a result of doing this fellowship program, new policies being proposed. There were new and more resources, so not only were they able to use their new skills to access new resources, but they also had more resources because of their connection to the fellowship program. There were also new and improved community programs. So as a result of this capacity building, they went back to their communities and designed and implemented community programs that would help their community in addressing health outcomes. So as I mentioned before, the evaluation only captures changes that occurred during the fellowship year. So self-described changes. It cannot capture health outcome changes. And that's part of the problem that this program is now facing. So while the evaluation data show that the enhanced cognitive behavioral changes and skills among the fellows are leading to significant community actions and changes, they cannot connect the changes to health outcomes, even though the literature does suggest that these actions would lead to improved health outcomes. Another thing that I mentioned earlier was that these communities had the opportunity to go onto the internet-based community and share success stories, but after a couple years of evaluating the program, the leaders of it found that no one was actually sharing their success stories, and they found out through evaluating that it's because these Native communities don't feel comfortable recognizing their successes because they feel that it's placing one community group above another, and that's just, they feel is culturally inappropriate. So that was something that the leaders of this program had to go back and address and sort of change their hopes and plans for how the internet-based community platform would be used in the future. Moving on to dissemination and next steps. So again, the authors note the ability thus far of the evaluation process to connect outcomes shown on previous slide to health outcomes. So their plan is that they really want to create a longitudinal design that would help assess these linkages in concrete terms, rather than just assuming based on the literature that's leading to these health outcomes. They want to know that for sure. In the future, the fellowship is shifting its focus to developing a 3-year commitment. 1 year would be intensive retreat structure as the original one is, and then it would be followed by ongoing technical assistance, coaching, distance and web-based learning, and cross-team sharing and learning. So they don't seem to have decided whether that will continue to be an in-person process or if it will be using the internet-based community platform. But either way, they're thinking that they want to expand the program, make it a little more in-depth, make it longer. That way people are getting attention and the coaching that they need for longer. And hopefully that will increase the long-term sustainability of this project. They're also hoping to develop further training opportunities for alumni. So these would include training and program evaluation, things like digital storytelling, policy implementation and monitoring, and things like grant writing. So they would be even more in depth and skill-based than the fellowship itself, and alumni would be able to, if they were interested, would be able to come back and learn things that maybe they feel they specifically need in their role. Overall, based on the literature I've read about this project, the leaders of it are recommending an evaluation strategy based on longitudinal tracking of alumni, teams, and communities that can make the associations between community and regional changes and health and socioeconomic impacts. So more of what I talked about in this slide and the previous slides. Okay, so in conclusion, it's unclear as to whether these community actions as a result of the fellowship have led to improved health outcomes. However, the fellowship program has successfully improved skills and confidence of community leaders to address those health outcomes. So while we cannot yet make the link between these individual and team changes, we can say that capacity has been built based on the evaluation of the fellowship program in years past. And lastly, before I wrap it all up, I want to give a brief sort of critical analysis of this community-based participatory research project. This is based on my own understanding of CBPR principles and comparing it to previous case studies that I've looked at for this course. So first I'll kind of go over what I saw as the strengths of the program and what I saw as some of the weaknesses. One of those strengths was demonstrating commitment to long-term capacity building and subsequent health outcome improvements. The fact that this has been ongoing for over a decade now, and there has been consistent evaluation and commitment to making changes where necessary and to building capacity in the fellows, and now this continued expression of, okay, we want to connect the behavioral changes to health outcomes. I think that's really showing that all the partners involved are committed to those things they set out to do from the very beginning. Another strength I saw is that the evaluation process is participatory. So as discussed before, the evaluation process is done not only through self-reflection of the fellows, but it's also done of participatory teams, and it's even evolved over time such that there is a specific team of people each year who are following the fellowship program and are doing active evaluation along the way. Another strength I saw was that fellows are all members of Native communities. So the Healthy Native Communities Partnership is run by Native members, and all of the fellows who are participating all come from Native communities. They're not necessarily just simply Native community members. They're oftentimes leaders, whether it's religious leaders, policy leaders, health leaders, what have you, but overall they do represent a cross-section of those Native communities that are participating in the program every year. And I thought another strength of the program was the use of the medicine wheel. It was meant to connect to community identity, and I think it successfully does this. Of course, it's very general, and like I said before, the beliefs and the culture of each Native community is vastly different. There's great diversity across all of them, but the curriculum made sure that it addressed shared values and philosophies. So, in other words, this is not a westernized approach to community capacity building. This is very much a native values-based program. Some of the weaknesses that I saw were that on the flip side of using the medicine wheel, using a nationally oriented curriculum rather than a regional or community by community basis, the fellowship program, in my opinion, does lack the ability to address nuances of each community. Now, it is possible that the program has been able to address nuances in the weeks of fellowship, but that was not communicated in the literature that I read about the project, so it's hard to say just based on that. Another weakness that I saw was because of that inability to address the nuances of each community, there may not be, in fact, a connection to community identity. Just because they're using the medicine wheel doesn't necessarily mean that the members who are participating do feel as though the program is connecting to their identities. And that may be something they're addressing in the evaluation, but again, it wasn't something I was able to find in the literature, so I can't say for sure. And again, can't say for sure because of the literature I read. It is unclear if fellows are required to disseminate information to the communities. So I'm not sure if at the end of the fellowship program they are in fact going back and telling the community about what they're doing and about the program and about what they're learning, or if they're simply just using the skills they've learned to enhance their processes more on like a team level rather than like, I guess, involving the community. So it's not clear that while their capacity is being built, they're in turn returning to their communities and building the capacity of community members. And it's also not clear if the evaluation information is being disseminated to fellows post-program. So there's those pre-interviews and post-interviews of all the fellows who are involved in the program, but I'm not sure if the information gathered by doing those interviews is being shared with the participants. But overall, that wraps up this presentation. I thought this was a really interesting case study, and I hope you also were able to learn some things about this program and about capacity building in Native communities. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.